next series in Reflections from Pharmacy Leaders, and I'm calling this Advancing the Profession. And it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Lucinda Maine here this afternoon. She's currently Executive Vice President and CEO of AACP, which is the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy. And she's recognized as a leader on both the national and international level for pharmacy education. Recently, I believe it was in 2019, she received the Remington Honor Medal, which is the highest award that the profession of pharmacy gives from APHA. Her roots are grounded in leadership in APHA, and before our organizational leadership, she was served in faculty and administrative roles at Stanford University. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this share, and I'll start off with the series of questions I have. Okay, so we'd like to learn more about your journey to your current position and recognition as a leader. And often I paraphrase this question to say, if there are key events, turning points, or people which really influence you in your journey.
So it's a 40-year journey that actually, in your introduction, you mentioned the 2019 Remington Medal, and you give a speech, and it's published in the Journal of APHA, which it was in May of 2019. It was actually my stepfather, because I had not thought about pharmacy as I was growing up. I was going to be an elementary school teacher, and then I liked biology, and that was sort of the segue into potentially a health career. And my stepdad, who built submarines for a living, said, "Have you ever thought about pharmacy?" And I said, "Actually, I haven't." And he said, "You know, you need to go talk to our pharmacist, Charles Dart, who we were in Mobile, Alabama at the time, and he was an Auburn grad, and I was planning on going to Auburn. And I went to visit him. He ran a small pharmacy in the western part of Mobile, and he gave me the classic, "Oh, Lucinda, fabulous career. 5 years, you get out, you make $20,000. And he gave me and for women, which was a novel thing for the profession of pharmacy at the time, talked about the flexibility of the career, you know, for part-time or family or whatever. And so I said, "Gosh, he sounds so enthusiastic." And quite frankly, I've seen him as recently as about a year ago, and he continues to be, and well into his 70s, he's practicing part-time, still adores the profession of pharmacy. He's practiced in a lot of different settings throughout his career. And so that's where it started. But really the key to my leadership journey in pharmacy started when I was a P1 pharmacy student at Auburn, and upperclassmen who were very active in what is now APHA ASP strongly insisted that I go to the national SAFA or APHA ASP meeting in May of 1977 in New York City. And until last month when they had to cancel, I have gone to the APHA meeting every year since, either in the capacity of running for office, which I did the very next year to run for student APHA president-elect and was successful. So it's been a long journey. It's been influenced by a lot of really wonderful, thoughtful people who have taught me a lot and have facilitated my passage for the last 4 decades.
Wow. And I tell people I've been nearly 50 years in the profession, so, but not quite 50, but almost. So yeah, very good. Excellent. So one of the things that I also ask folks is, what do you believe will be your legacy in 20 years? In other words, and sometimes people struggle with legacy because often legacy is something you really don't know until after you're out of the profession probably, and people say, "Oh, that person did." But maybe rephrase it as, what are you most proud of in terms of your contributions that really has helped advance the pharmacy profession?
So I'll draw on one from the 10 years that I was on the APHA staff, and then I'll draw on one while I've been at AACP. And I was at APHA, and played a partial role in pharmacy-based immunization, introduction, touch, and I tell people when we started, we could probably count on two hands the pharmacists in America who had decided that they had the authority and had worked out the model to administer flu shots, essentially was what they were doing. And now the count is well over 300,000 individuals in the profession have been certified through one mechanism or another. And that simple act, which is not a complicated care delivery scenario, although there's a lot of skill and knowledge that goes into it, really began to convince pharmacists that they were really patient care providers, they were public health agents, and it got the attention of the CDC and a lot of other public and private organizations that got behind that. So immunization delivery, I would characterize as my 1990s contribution. And while I've been at ACP, I probably point with the greatest amount of pride to the work that we've contributed in interprofessional education and team-based care. I was just telling another group of people what the history of the interprofessional education collaborative was. 2009, representatives from 6 health professions education organizations huddled in a meeting room in a hotel in Georgetown. And at that time, probably only pharmacy and nursing had strong accreditation components related to IPE. And today, IPEC, which started with 6, has 21 national health professions education organizations. One of those is allied health. So essentially, we've got everybody on the bus. And most everyone's accreditation standards today emphasizes interprofessional learning for team-based care. And so, and not only did we do it, we modeled team-based collaboration at every step along the way. And those are some of my closest peers and best friends today.
That's great. That's great. So the other question I always ask is advice for students in their professional journey. And you can go as long as you want on that, because usually you have lots of advice, including how they can develop as a leader. And again, I use the term leader with a little L, how to influence to advance the profession, because that's really what we're talking about.
That's right. There are so many approaches that I have appreciated along the way. The first is to know enough about the profession that they're pursuing and the fact that it has so many different pathways for professional fulfillment and engagement. And I'm working with one of our committees right now on what should we do within the PharmD program today to make our president's bold aim of higher levels of collaboration between physicians and pharmacists specifically, more real time and a great expanding career opportunity for pharmacy graduates. We say we need to do a better job of helping both applicants and early PharmD students completely understand all of these opportunities in the profession, allow them to do more personalization of their education, including elective didactic courses, experiential learning at both the IPPE and the APPE, as well as I used every summer from my freshman year, that pharmacist that encouraged me to go to pharmacy school hired me behind the counter after my freshman year. And that was when the deal was done, because he taught me so much and I found out how fascinating medications were. But then one summer I worked in the chemistry lab of my father's shipyard. That was not my career trajectory. Then I worked in a teaching hospital summer after my P1 year. I worked for a pharmaceutical company the next summer, and then I worked for then the head of the pharmacy branch of the Indian Health Service for my last summer in pharmacy school. And so I tell people to experiment with the profession so that you can really find the part of it that it just enthralls you. And in terms of leadership opportunities, I think those experiences ground you to take on formal roles, whether that's just as a committee member of a operation fill in the blank APHA ASP group. We have so many more pharmacy organizations today in our schools and colleges of pharmacy than when you and I were in school, Terry. And so that means there's tremendous opportunities for both committee membership and committee leadership to learn how to put together an event, to plan and execute and evaluate. Those are all very important tenets of being a successful leader. And then the other thing that happened through my involvement in student APHA was I met 4 other female pharmacy students at 3 other pharmacy schools while I was becoming more active at the national level in student APHA. And we became this tight network of supportive, encouraging friends and colleagues that persists to this day. And each of us has taken a different trajectory in our career, which is interesting. And so use those connections both on your campus, at your school, but the ones that you would derive from being actively involved at the regional level, the state association level is critically important, or with national associations, to build and cultivate your network. And because that's, at the end of the day, what really keeps you going, keeps you energized. That network of those other 4 women helped me determine that it was time for me to pursue another position after I had been at APHA for 10 years. That was 18 years ago when I decided to take my chances and apply for the AACP Executive Vice President position. They're the ones that told me once again, yep, Lucinda, it's time, go for it.
Wow, great. And one of the things we've talked about, good books that you recommend, and in this course, they will be reading one, they'll be selecting from a list of books. I have currently about 22 books on my list, but is there a particular book that you would recommend for them that would provide some really good insights that would help them develop as leaders?
So I don't know if you have any of Brene Brown's books on your list.
Yes, I have one.
And
Dare to Lead, isn't it?
Dare to Lead is the one that I was going to recommend. She's so interesting. I stumbled on her accidentally. The summer of 2018, I had permission from my board to take the month of August off. I had barely cobbled 2 weeks of vacation time together the entire time that I've been at AACP.
Wow.
And they welcomed the opportunity for me we didn't even call it a mini sabbatical, because 4 weeks isn't enough time to approach something from a sabbatical perspective. So it was really a decompensation experience. And August is a great time to do that in the cycle of activities for AACP. And I re-energized my reading for pleasure of that month. And someone had sent me a link to a YouTube video, a TED Talk video. It was supposed to be 3 minutes and 26 seconds. And I clicked on it, and it took me to Brené's classic TED Talk where she builds out of her dissertation. And I quickly realized that it was, a 20-minute TED Talk, so it wasn't the one that this person had suggested.
Oh,
So I found her accidentally, but then I went out and got, I even forget which of the 5 books that I've now read I got first. But I've just learned so much from her work. In fact, I was listening to one of her podcasts on my way south. I have another job, which is as a pastor's wife, And
Mhm.
the churches that Dan serves are 80 miles from our primary house here in Arlington.
Oh, wow.
Will frequently, as I'm going down for the weekend, listen to a podcast, and I happened on one of hers this past Friday as I was heading down.
Wow. Wow. That's great. Yeah. I've been fortunate in the later part of my career. I've been honored to teach in the undergraduate honors program on campus. And I developed a health humanities course, and that involves reading. The students have to read books, and we have a whole list. And there's 25 students in the class. So I probably, in the last few years teaching that class, because I try to read most of the books. I don't get all of them read in a semester. I try to get 8 or 10 read. But it's been wonderful. I've really enjoyed reading both fiction and nonfiction, dealing with lots of things in terms of healthcare, not so much leadership, but healthcare. And that's been a real pleasure. It's been kind of the highlight, I think, of I say it's the highlight of my career. The last thing I taught, oh, not the last thing. I'm developing this new course, but there's never a last thing, I guess.
Well, as I shared with you, you're entering your preferment era where you get to do those things that you prefer to do versus those things that you absolutely have to do.
Absolutely, and that's why it's the best part of one's career, and that's great. And the last question I have, as we are, this is a history class, and we're going to be studying the history of the profession as we transform to a more patient-centered profession, starting with the 1900s all the way to 2020. And in 10 years from now, we'll be studying the decade of the 2020s, and one of the highlights or key milestone in this decade will be this pandemic,
No question about it.
COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, we will see this as a major event that's happened in the world that will have impacted our profession. So I kind of phrase this question, opportunity for the pharmacy profession. What this pandemic creates, and that's kind of a stock answer, but looking at what, some will describe it as it will be a major turning point in our profession to the next chapter for our profession. So I phrase it even differently. Of course, we won't know this but as we study history, we've seen major happenings in the world that have been major turning points to the profession. So do you care to comment about that and your insights in that perspective?
So I'll do it internally and then I'll do it externally. I think the lessons that we glean from the pandemic will have ripple effects that we can't even begin to fully appreciate. But over the course of the last 4 weeks, one of the criticisms that is leveled frequently about pharmacy, I think it's because of the varied practice settings where pharmacists find themselves working, and the perception that the work in each of those settings is somehow very different from another setting. And so the criticism is often that the national organizations fail to collaborate successfully, and as a result, we're weaker as a profession. In virtually, I think it was less than a week, 12 national pharmacy organizations collaborated to produce a really remarkable joint statement about pharmacists' role in the pandemic. And it was not only what were we capable of contributing that shouldn't be overlooked, but there were calls out for things that the HHS and the CDC and CMS and the FDA and others needed to consider, state boards, governors. And I've never seen my colleague organizations commit to that level of collaboration that they did in the face of the pandemic. And so one of the things that I hope above all else is that we don't forget that lesson and commit to that kind of collaboration, hopefully not quite so acutely, but longitudinally. And then the other thing that I've been really pleased with is the recognition of the essential role of pharmacists by public and private stakeholders including those at HHS. Um, there was a little hiccup with Senator Schumer, who mischaracterized us as medical professionals, and then he backtracked once APHA called him to task on that. There have been great mainstream media profiles of pharmacists who are right out there on the front lines, oftentimes without access to adequate PPE as we mourn. But I would like to think that this is a turning point in the public appreciation of the value that is underestimated across the population here and around the world.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, very good. Thank you very much for your insights. So I'm going to say we can stop recording.
All right.
I can't do it. I'm going to go.